we're going to start the MyEV workshop. So I think looks like most of you at least were in the session earlier this morning. So Terry has a few more things to kind of walk through, actually from his same slideshow he was had this morning. To kind of walk through a little bit more, and then we'll actually walk through, we'll go to the MyEV website, and Nick Gunner, who's standing over here, is going to help us walk through kind of how to set up a farm and bring some, we have a kind of a dummy data set that we'll use. And again, if you have a computer or laptop with you and you want to follow along, you can absolutely do that. Or if you just want to watch and kind of ask questions, you're welcome to do that too. I will just say that there are a couple of us who will be available to kind of help if you get stuck on anything. While Terry and Nick are kind of running through things, myself, Jen Russo is in the back here, and Kathleen is right there. Kathleen Canelli is a graduate student with Katie Gold and has been working with MyEV quite a bit as well. So if you get stuck on anything and need a hand, give one of us a shout. So, all right, Terry.
Thank you, Hans. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Okay, I'm going to walk you through very quickly, like kind of our workflow on what we are after. Your head might be spinning. You're going to be like, what the heck is he talking about? So don't worry about it, because then we're going to slow it way down and go back to the beginning. And Nick has like a little tutorial just to set up a farm, make a block, install some data on a block, and process that data. But I just wanted to kind of give you a flavor for like what we're after in terms of what the program can do. And then kind of show you even at the end when your head is spinning to say, and if you just look at the program, it walks you through it. Okay, so this was the very low-tech version. Took my phone with a data logger or a data collector, mapped my potassium deficiency within the field, and then did the data processing like we talked about. Oops. Okay. So this is a map from RIT. They fly their hyperspectral drone. We match it up with data that or tissues that we had collected in the field. So he's giving me a relative predicted potassium map of that field. And this is at veraison. So it's before we see any blackleaf symptoms in that field. And then I process that. And when I do the whole interpolation thing, it looks like that. And then we validate that. So I take that map, I have manual samples in the field, I collect tissues and have them analyzed, so I know what the potassium level was in that, and then the program translates it. So I create the data points in what we call a grid generator, and then I marry those two data sets together. So my high density spatial data set and my low density field measurements, I put those together in what's called a translator, and then you can see the relationship, the mathematical relationship between those two data layers. And if it looks good, you can hit the translate button. If it doesn't look good to you as a grower, like, don't do it. Like if there's no relationship between what you collected in the field and the spatial data, then you can't translate it. Yes.
When it says correlation detected, what's a good correlation?
Yeah.
0.5.
Well, of course, as scientists, we want a correlation coefficient of like 0.9, right? Like a perfect one-to-one relationship, you're going to get a correlation of 1. And then anything less than that, there's error in the data. You're going to get a correlation less than that. So usually when we're talking about spatial data, so I'm comparing a 40,000 point data set with a 40,000 point data set, I get an R value, not R squared, but an R value of like 0.4. It's like, oh, that's pretty good. In this case, it's somewhere in between when you're having a 40,000 point data set and a 10 point data set. You know, if you're getting an R value of 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, then I'm like, okay, that looks pretty good. It actually has a lot more to do with your knowledge of the field than what's statistically significant from a research paper publication standpoint. Okay, so I get a translated map of potassium in my field. And so I know that I want my target values at veraison of my petioles to be 1.2 to 2% potassium. So I know by looking at that legend that most of that field needs potassium, but I don't know how am I going to do that variable rate, right? We have guidelines, talk to Hans, talk to Jen about when you look at your tissue values, what your guidelines should say. Okay, here's my spiel about crop load. Crop load is yield to pruning weight ratio. So we use pre-bloom NDVI to stratify our crop estimation samples, and that's actually a yield map. And then vine size, we use late season NDVI, stratify our pruning weight samples against that. So I can get a yield to pruning weight ratio. So I know where the vine, and I calculate a Ravaz index. And we know with Concord, we want a Ravaz index of 15. If it's above 15, the vines are overcropped. And if it's lower than 15, their vines are undercropped. So in this case, the blue ones are overcropped and the red ones are undercropped. And the whole point about doing the data interpolation, again, is that I'm projecting all of that data to the same grid so that I can look at the mathematical relationships between those different data layers. And then we do a thing called multivariate zoning. So if I take one data set and I zone it for 3 zones, the program will do that. And without getting too technical, it does a thing called a k-means cluster analysis, meaning it looks at it takes that spatial data set, it looks at all the different combinations of all the different dots, and it separates them into 3 zones. And in those zones, the mean of those zones is as far apart as possible, and the variation within a zone is as small as possible. And it just uses a statistical analysis to do that. The cool thing is that you can do it on more than one layer. So in this example, I can use my observed potassium black leaf, that I took on my cell phone, and I can create a 3-zone map. And it's like, okay, that's pretty good. It shows me where the hot spots are, and I can put more potassium in the red area. I can take my observed map plus my sensor map, which I validated, and put those 2 together and give me a zonal map, which looks a little bit different. Or I can take all 3 data layers, my observed, my sensor, and my crop load, put all 3 of those together, which I kind of see these management maps as good, better, best. The one on the bottom, here's a laser. Okay, so here I know my tissue potassium was low, but my crop was high, my crop load was high. So I'm really stressing those vines, and they have low potassium. So I'm going to put a lot of, if I'm going to decide what kind of rate I'm going to use a much higher rate there. And in this orange area, the potassium is somewhat low, but I'm not pushing them very hard. So I'm probably not going to put as much potassium there to get them to recover. And then in the yellow areas, they're also high in potassium, and I'm not pushing them. So I might not apply any potassium fertilizer there. And then when I'm all done, I take my prescription map and MyEV, everything in MyEV works off of point data files. And some of these commercial operation, they work off of polygon files. So in MyEV, you can export this as a polygon file, which imports into your Ag Leader or John Deere, and then you hook it up with your variable rate spreader and go forward from there. Okay, so that's the workflow. And if your head is swimming, great. The anatomy of MyEV, the platform is, you have farm level data. So your farm, the information about your farm, like the location, your blocks, who your collaborators are, all are under this farm button. And then this little thing that looks like a stack of coins is our data drawers. So any spatial data layer that you collect, that's going to be put on one of your blocks, you're going to find it there. And then the tools to do all this different data processing is under what we call the plugins button. So saying that, like, I'm never going to keep this straight. If you go to the plugins drawer, it walks you through the steps, right? You have your data interpolation, then your grid generator, which tells you where the points are in the vineyard to go collect your data. You match those 2 layers up in the translator to translate that data, and then you link all your different data layers together, and then select the ones that you want to make your management map. So it just steps you through that process. Okay, that's it. Nick has a kind of a easy tutorial of, this is going to be fun. So we're just going to run around, try and help you as Nick walks you through starting your farm, importing or making a block, importing data. We have a sample data set for you to import into that block and then process it. And then if that's as far as we get, I think that'd be great.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks, Terry. I always enjoy listening to Terry talk about the platform because he puts it in a much more, I guess, like cohesive manner, and it sounds great. When I'm like, because like I get so stuck in the weeds of building the platform.
I tell Nick, this is what I want. And he's like, I don't know why you want that, but I'll build it for you. And then I'm like, trust me, I know my thought process.
Yeah. Yeah. I locked myself in a room for like a month doing k-means analysis. And then, so anyway, it's nice to step back and see the bigger picture. And before going through the tutorial, I just wanted to mention that MyEV is still in like hyper development. So we really want to make a tool that's useful to you. So if you have ideas, if you have obviously bugs, you can submit bugs and we'll show you how to do that in the platform. But we really want to do our best to keep improving and making it better for you. So I've had a lot of situations where a grower reaches out and says, I'd really love it to be able to do this thing. And then I think, oh, geez, if I just made this little tweak to that plugin, it would solve their problem. And like within a couple of weeks, they have a new tool and something that they're able to use. So please feel welcome to keep the feedback coming to us. So the homepage is efficientvineyard.com. And we have actually, I set up a page. If you go to efficientvineyard.com/bev, I put up a page. This is just the tutorial walkthrough. And what I thought I'd do today is we will walk through these steps. And if anyone has any questions along the way, we really want to go slow, right? If you hit a roadblock, we want to fix those as we go because we really want to make this an interactive and learning session. And what I'll do is I can even update these shortly after the presentation, and you can refer back to this page if you want to run through the tutorial again. I believe the session will be recorded. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, great. So yeah, if everyone could navigate to efficientvineyard.com/bev. And then if you have another tab, if you want to go to efficientvineyard.com and click on the MyEV tool. If you have an account already, you can just log into your account. And if you don't, so you'll see this page no matter what. If you don't have an account, you can click create an account and just put in your email address and make up a password. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now, if you are creating a new account, how many of y'all are just creating a new account right now? Okay, if you create a new account, you're going to be prompted to create your farm. And I just want to make sure I don't miss anything here. Yeah, so you're going to create a farm. What I'd like you to do is call that farm Bev Workshop. This is so you can delete this farm later when you're all set and using your own farm. Now, if you're logged into your Efficient Vineyard account right now, go down to your user settings and click on My Farms. And let's go ahead and create a new farm here as well. Now, the address we're going to use actually in a specific location for this made up farm together. And that's going to be the Clairol facility in Portland. And I have that address right here. I'll put that back on the screen here in a second. It's 6592 West Main Road in Portland. So I'll come back here. If you're looking at your setup screen, so we're going to call this. And so basically you can use this search field up here to search for the address. So what did I say that was again? Thank you, Terry. 6592 Main Street, Portland, New York. And it should zoom you into the Claro facility here. And what I need you to do is click on one of the buildings. You should have this pin dropped on your map. So this is going to establish your farm, which we're calling Bev Workshop. And you're basically just saying, this is the latitude and longitude, kind of the home point of our farm. Does that make sense to everybody? Any hiccups thus far? And when you get that done, we'll just push save. And you should have a screen like this. So I'll give you a second. Everyone good? Okay, so we have established a farm. This farm has no blocks at this point. It's just, it's just got a name and a location. So let me check my itinerary here. Make sure I don't forget any steps.
Can't help anybody.
Okay, so we've done that. So the next step is to get your blocks into your farm. We're going to just add one block to this farm, and we're going to do it manually. So we're actually going to draw the block onto the field. So we're going to add the railroad block, and it looks something like this. And I'll go ahead and step through it real slow on the screen. So this is the Claro facility, and then right here, that's railroad block right there. So I'm going to just get that kind of centered a little bit. And I'm going to go up to my farm drawer, and I'm going to click on Create Blocks. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this block Railroad Block. We'll skip the description for now. For your own blocks, when you get into your own farm, if you have a GIS file with all your blocks, you can upload it one time right here, and it will actually generate you individual blocks. But today, again, we're going to just draw one block. So again, that block is Railroad Block. So I'm going to very carefully get it in the middle. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. It looks good. This white button here, that's the polygon draw button. So we're going to click on that. And then what we're going to do, this is a little bit of a precise tool. So just know that you can always change the shape and size of your block at a later time. So if you mess up, it's not a big deal. But the basic idea is you're just going to draw, you're going to click, and then click. You're going to go all the way around your block. This doesn't have to be rectangular. This could be, as many points as you need. I'm just going to do 4 really simple points. And then when you're done, you're going to go back to the original point and click that one more time. And there you go. Now you have your block. If I wanted to adjust this, I can actually grab the whole block and move it around. If I wanted to add another point, I could click one of these little dots that are between points to add another point, and then I could use that point to make the shape really funny. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to select that point again, and then I'm going to push delete. So anyway, so we have a rough outline of our block. We've named it Railroad Block, and then we can submit that block. And it's going to recompile your farm blocks. Anyone running into any issues thus far? Does everybody have something that looks somewhat like this? Not quite yet, okay. Well, in the meantime, I'll mention, you can actually set these blocks up to log whatever kind of data you want on these blocks. Right now, this block has a bug going on here, the lovely thing about live demos. It generates the acreage for you, and in your user settings, you can set that to metric or standard measurement. But right now we have a title and a description, but what you can do and I'm not going to go into it at this moment. There are tutorials about this, but you can actually add like variety in there if you wanted to log variety, or if you wanted to log a measurement of, you could put each year's yield or whatever you want.
So Nick, the question on so I have that same little bug where like a weird polygon forms different colors.
Yeah.
But it's still measuring the entire acreage, even if that color gets a little funky, I think.
Yeah, that coloring bug has to do with the mapping service that we leverage to render the map.
Okay.
So the calculation of the polygon area should be accurate.
Right.
All right, everybody have a map, basic map. You can repeat this process, name all your blocks, get them all. This is sort of the foundation of the areas on your farm. So now the fun part, we're going to get some data. So on efficientvineyard.com/bev, I've got this sample data set. There's a button that says download NDVI sample. I'm expecting that if you click it, it should just download it to your downloads folder. If it doesn't, let me know, and we might have to right click on it and download or something funny like that. This data set is an NDVI file, and it's right off of a GeoScout logger. It's a text file. So this would come right off your tractor. Then what we're going to do is should we pause a bit? How are we doing to the rovers out there? I think I'm going to assume we're good. Please raise your hand and like stop me, pump the brakes if I'm going too fast. Okay. Let's take that data set and let's upload it now. So this is our data sets drawer. The data sets drawer is this is where all your data gets stored and organized. You can actually create folders to drag and drop and reorder things in here. What we're going to do is push upload data. And we're going to give it a name. Let's call this raw NDVI. And then we'll choose file and navigate to our downloads. And then you'll grab that NDVI file and open it, and cross our fingers that all of us doing this at the same time doesn't blow up my server. Takes a second to upload, it processes it on the cloud, standardizes the data format, and then it renders out a preview of that data set. Once you see this preview, you can go ahead and submit, and that's going to save that data set for you. And then it should launch it as well. How are we feeling? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. Let's see what the next. So now we want to visualize this. What we can do, so this data set is the entire farm. So obviously you can see this is railroad block up here, but this was taken in one scan, all of these blocks. But for the sake of the example, we're going to walk through this drawer over here. This is all of the visualization settings. So what we want to do right now, the color of all these data points is solid and it's just yellow. So what we want to do is make those colors value-based. So we'll push the value-based option under color setting. And then there's all sorts of data that was actually collected in this file. So if I were to click on, let's see, elevation, you're going to see how the elevation changes across all those blocks. If I wanted to check up on whoever's driving my machines, see how fast they were going, we can see how fast someone's going in this part of the vineyard, that part of the vineyard. But really what we're getting at in this data set is the NDVI. That was the main piece of data that was collected at each of these data points. So I'm going to click NDVI. And it's not going to look like much. It just looks green. There's a couple, if I zoom in on here, you're going to see there's a couple of points that are a little bit different colored, but mostly it's all just sort of green right in the middle of this scale. And we'll explain why that's doing that in a minute. But the first thing I want to do before we go any further is I want to trim this data down to just data that is inside of the railroad block, because that's the block that we're focusing on in this tutorial. So the way we take this data set and copy it, leaving behind everything except for the points that are in the railroad block, is using this copy data set tool. Now, I should explain the reason we're going to copy this data set to a new data set is because we don't want to be destructive. I don't want to do something to this data set where we lose data. I want to create a new data set that only has the data I'm interested in. And that's because if I want to go back in time, I can go back to this raw data set and everything's still there. I don't know if anyone's ever done anything with Photoshop. This is like best practice in Photoshop or in graphic design. If you're moving to the next step, you make a copy of the base layer, hide that layer, and then move on. Because if you mess up, you can just go back in time. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the data set. And we'll call this one, just want to make sure I'm precise here. Okay, we're going to call it railroad block raw NDVI. So it's still just raw NDVI, but we're going to limit it to the railroad block. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to click on this checkbox, trim data using selected blocks. And then we have to select the block that we want to use. You can use multiple blocks if you're analyzing multiple blocks at the same time. And then we're just going to copy the data set. And it's going to run some process on the cloud, and then it's going to drop that data set right here into your data sets drawer. And then I can launch that. And you're going to see the same visualization, except for it's just railroad block. Does that make sense? Any questions thus far? Am I going too fast, too slow, just right? Oh, I'm sorry. We have plenty of time, by the way. We've got 2 full sessions. We wanted this to be, slow and steady.
We have one data file has been imported, name, and we're having a hard time scrolling up on it.
Oh.
Workaround. Go to settings in Safari and zoom to like 75% of the web browser and then reload it. So basically you're shrinking the so I was having the same problem, and that was
I should say that the mobile versions of the platform have been optimized mostly for read operations. So like loading up a data set, just looking at the data set. And that version has also been optimized for collecting data in the field. These more complicated operations, they really have been designed for desktop. So if you're analyzing, you're doing processing, I'm just going to say right now, when we get into like using the plugins, you can't even do that on the mobile browser, just so you're aware. So sorry about that. It does work pretty well on a iPad size screen. Shall we move forward? What do you think, Jen? Yeah, it's not going to work. It's not going to work trying to do the whole tutorial on a phone. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes. So the purple dots of death are the loading screen. If you ever get in there, try to refresh the page. Yeah, I apologize. We should have been more specific the tutorial really, it will be difficult to accomplish the whole thing on a cell phone. What's that? Oh, you did? Okay. I mean, it will work. There are, like you said, there are ways around it, but. Not the what? Gotcha. What I think would be a little bit more productive might be, let's walk through the tutorial on desktops. If you don't have a desktop, what we'll do then is we'll try to address some specific use cases, and we'll try to walk through maybe a few more than we were planning. Would that seem okay? Let's try that. So we have railroad block. It's been visualized by NDVI. And now, so the reason this is just green, let's talk about that for a second. So NDVI coming out of the sensor should be a value between 0 and 1. And yet when I look at this ramp here, I've got a negative 5.175 all the way up to 5.85864. So basically, when the sensor's looking at the sky, it's going to get an extreme off the charts value. And if it's looking at a shadow, it's going to get an extreme off the charts value. And those couple of very extreme values, they're throwing off the entire visualization. So what we need to do now is filter out the obviously outlier data. So the way we do that is in our visualization drawer, or scroll right down to the bottom. And we have a filters area. If we add a filter, we can filter out whatever we want. So we're going to filter by NDVI. And I'm going to put in my minimum value, 0, because that's the lowest we should be able to go. And in the maximum, I'm going to put 1. And then I'm going to trim that data. Now, I should point out that when we trim with filters, we're not destroying the data underneath. So you can always just remove the filter and that data is still in this data set. Now, this is starting to look like a bell curve, which is what we want. But we're still having this long tail here, and we've got some super high values that just don't occur in nature. So what we try to do is drag these handles in to trim the edges of the bell curve in. And it's going to show you what you're trimming. So most of this is edge effect around the edges of the block. We're going to keep dragging in, and we're going to get to where we're starting to get real data. These values are in the middle of the field. So you might, using your best judgment, say, I know those are outliers still. I want a nice clean bell curve, or no, that's actually a low spot that has pretty extreme values. So you're using your eyes, your intuition, you're trying to make a more reasonable bell curve. So I'll trim that data. So now you're going to start to see some variability with your eyes. So when I look at this, I can squint my eyes a little bit and I can see like there's a little bit of an oranger spot, a little bit more of a green spot. So it's getting there, and we're starting to get a useful map. But what we really want to do is smooth this out. And as was discussed in the previous sessions, we want to run an interpolation process on this that will start to predict the wider trends on the data. Before I move ahead, I'm going to just check my list here, make sure I didn't forget anything.
So when I said you get a sensor data set of 8%
20% old. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing right now is you're getting rid of the garbage. You got rid of the stuff that was like outside of the block or in the headlands. And then you took erroneous data, like if the sensor was pointed at the sky, and you basically just trimmed all that bad stuff out. So now what you're left with is good data that you can work with.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to have to use a plugin. So the core part of MyEV, the datasets drawer, your datasets, your basic visualization settings of the dataset, they're all right here in these main drawers. But when we want to do something a little bit more advanced, like interpolate a dataset, we need to use a plugin. So those are located in our plugins drawer. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that drawer, and I'm going to launch the interpolator. This is going to bring up a sort of file browser. So this is all of your data sets in your farm. If you had folders, you could navigate through those folders. And so I'm going to select railroad block, raw, NDVI. And then it's going to ask again, what do we want to interpolate by? And again, we're interested in NDVI. We'll skip the advanced options for today and push interpolate. Depending on the size of the block and how much data is in there, this can take a little bit of time. This is a pretty small data set, so it goes pretty fast. And then, so it's ran the process. We're ready to save this. We'll give this new data set a name. So this is generating yet again another copy of the data. Again, because we don't want to destroy any data. We want to just generate a new version that does the thing we want to do. So what we'll do is we'll just call this interpolated railroad block NDVI. Labeling and organizing in folders, Terry will tell you, is your friend. Starting to get into the habit of a system. How do we name things? You know, how do we make it clear that I'm at this step of the process? You could create different folders for all these steps. You could have a raw folder, clipped folder, or each block could have a folder, whatever you choose. But as long as you're sort of thinking in those terms. So this choose a location, we're right in the root of our file system here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that data set to MyEV. And when it's done, it'll tell us that it's been added to our datasets drawer. So we can close the plugin at this point. And if I come back to my datasets, you'll see right there is an interpolated railroad block NDVI. And I'll launch that. And you can see a much more smooth looking something. Any questions? I should walk through a couple of the other options in visualization. So if I zoom in here, you'll really see that grid system that we were talking about. This is a universal grid system that we built. And basically what that means is if you change the size of your block, or you move your block slightly, or if you run an interpolation on 3 blocks, and then you run another interpolation on 1 block, if they overlap, these points will always overlap each other. And so it provides a nice historical account. It's based on a 3-meter grid, and it's based on it's a coordinate system that we don't need to go into at the moment. But so we do have the ability to zone this now. So if I come down here under my ramp settings, right now it's a linear ramp. And what that basically means is we're going from orange to green and every value of color in between. If I change that ramp to Jenks, it's going to create us a 5-zone Jenks visualization. I can go 3 zones. I can go use a different color preset. Or I can even manually choose, a low, medium, and high color. Something like that. if you get into a situation where it looks like this, it's like you can't even see the zones, you can actually change the size of each point under the point size. Oh, a little too big. Something like that. And then finally, let's say we're content with this and, we trust this NDVI. We know that this NDVI correlates to some management decision we want to make in the field. And we have a variable rate tool. Let me just fix this. What we can do right at this point in the downloads area, we can click on this download polygons shapefile. What this is going to do is it's going to create a polygon file with these 3 zones that you can then load right into your variable rate piece of hardware or the software that integrates with that hardware. Does that make sense? There's got to be a question to this point. Yes. Yes. Oh, so the question was, does each dot represent a 3x3 meter location? Yes. So at this point, we can go larger. We have some options in those advanced settings. So we do, I think, a 5 meter and a 10 meter. So it depends on how wide scaling. We'd love to get it down to 1 meter. Yeah, but we just haven't. This seems to be a nice middle ground density. 3 meters in New York seems to correlate with the rough distance of 9-foot row spacing, or row and vine spacing. Is that? What it does is it takes the whole thing and it distills it down to polygons. And then those polygons are what your hardware reads. So
and so we just, we just figured out how to turn a point file into a polygon file on the export part of it. So as soon as you hit zone polygon, as you download it as a polygon shape file, it'll just save it to your hard drive, probably in your downloads folder, and then you can put it on a thumb drive and take it wherever you want to go.
We would love it if the industry would standardize prescription mapping so that we could download an actual file that's ready to go into your hardware, but they all have their nuances. So anyway, they accept shape files that are polygons. So there's this extra step that's a little bit annoying, but you have to load it into that company's software, and then that gets exported to your actual prescription map that can be loaded onto the tractor. Yep.
Minimum data set to go in.
No minimum data set. And actually the last section of the tutorial, we'll talk about collectors. And the one example, I think it's the most simple data collector that you could think of, is the broken post flag. And if you've got three broken posts, you can just flag those and you have a map that's just 3 dots. Now, if you're looking to interpolate, I think Terry's done some things that are not all that high dense, and they run the inverse distance weighted interpolation, and it works. And we're open to other models too.
Picked a bunch of vines. 50, 60, 80. They're a minimum to interpolate.
We haven't tested. I think we may have tested some things. I mean, the map ends up overgeneralized. but like obviously the lower density, the lower accuracy, but it will, I mean, we could try it. That's a great, want to just try it? We can do a data collector and then we'll just try it right now.
So if anybody in here, I was asking if there's a minimum number of data points to do the interpolation. So if you went out and harvested 50 vines, can you get a map similar to this NDVI map?
Yeah. So what I will do is the sort of last thing I wanted to talk about in the tutorial are the collectors. This button in the lower right, it's a little clipboard, which is what it replaces. So you don't need to carry paper out in the field anymore. So if you click on this collect data button, it's an empty drawer. So because we haven't created any collectors yet. So we'll go ahead and create a data collector. And we'll call this, what kind of data do you want to collect in our made up universe here? Pruning weight. Okay. So we have a pruning weight collector, and then we're going to add fields. It's a little confusing. We really should call these headers, I think, or something, because they're not fields in the sense of like a field that you're walking through, but they're like a field, that, like an Excel column. So so we have pruning weight. So that's going to be a number. And we'll just put weight. What would be a reasonable minimum weight that you'd be collecting? Well, 0, okay. And a reasonable maximum, 5. And these are pounds? Okay. So the step is, you don't have to put this step in, by the way. You can, if you don't, you have to put the step in if you're using mins and maxes, but you don't have to use the minimum and the maximum. If you leave all those blank, it's just going to be a number field. You can enter manually a number, but by putting in a minimum and a maximum, and then a step, it gives you a nice little slider that you can really easily thumb when you're out in the field. So I'll show you that in a second. So the step, we're going to do 0.25. So basically we can pick values 0, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, all the way up to 5. The suffix will make LBS, and we'll require this field. So you have to give it an answer before it'll accept the submission. So we've got a weight. What else would we want to know about that pruning weight?
I always add a notes field.
A notes. Okay, so we'll add a text field for notes. And we'll make that not required. So you don't have to submit that. You can do an image field. Each collector can have one image field. And that image field, you can upload a bunch of images. So if you were doing frost damage, if you were doing pests or whatever it is, broken posts, you could actually take pictures of things in here.
Yeah, the example we did last year in the field was we took an early season NDVI when the shoots were like 3 inches. And then,
Sorry, we took an NDVI when the shoots were 3 inches, and then that took like whatever, a half hour to scan that field. And then I just walked down like a one stratified row where I knew there was high and low. And I took pictures. So I geo-referenced a picture so that I could go back to my office and sit down and count the shoots that are in that picture. Then I related NDVI to shoot count. I didn't have to stand out in the field to do it.
There's some other settings in here I won't go over, but just to mention, you can export your settings and then import them if you want to duplicate this form that you're building, or if you want to share that form with another grower on their own farm, they could very easily download your template, upload it, tweak it, change it how they like. So, I'm going to go ahead and just save this. Now, what happens when you save a collector is it puts a big button in your data collector's drawer. But what it also does is it creates a data set in your data sets drawer, and you'll see it as this little satellite icon. And if I hover over that, it says this is a dynamic data set. That we call a data set dynamic when there's data that's actively being collected and being put into the thing. Dynamic data sets are really cool. They have version control, which is a little bit beyond the scope of this talk, but basically, if you're going back to data points and you're collecting more data, every time you change a data point, it doesn't change, it actually creates a new version of the data point. And then you can go look at one data point's version control. We can export all that stuff. So we can really start to see the data over time if you're using a complicated collector. So anyway, but this will behave just like any other data set. You can visualize it, you can interpolate it, you can do whatever you want to it. But we have to actually collect some data. So I'm going to refresh
And
my
you
farm.
can open that data collector, collect a bunch of data. It gets dark. You go home, you eat dinner, you come back the next day. You can open up the same data collector and keep appending more data to that same data collector.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on. So I'm going to pretend that I'm out in the field right now. And this is on my mobile phone, so it would be a smaller screen, but I just, with my thumb, I'd click on collect data. I'm walking through this block, railroad block. Boom, I'm going to take a pruning weight. Now I'm going to click the map because I don't have my, I'm not actually out there in Brockton at the moment, but when you're on your phone, there's a little GPS button. There are sometimes you might have to Google to make sure your phone's set up to allow the GPS to be activated. But when you push that button, actually, when you launch a collector, it's going to automatically try to go get your location. There'll be a little indicator up here that tells you how accurate, down to like it's a 5-meter accuracy, 2-meter accuracy. So sometimes if you hold your phone up, if you're looking for a really good reading, it'll listen to the sky for a little bit and it'll get a better reading with a little bit of time. And we can usually get it down to about 1 meter, definitely 3 meters on an iPhone. So you can see here's your slider. So again, I could thumb this and say this is a, I don't know, 2-pound vine. I can make a note and submit that. It's going to submit the data and it's going to load up a new form immediately. So now I can walk to my next point and say, we'll do, here's a 3-pound over here. I'm just going to do this very randomly. So the interpolation is not going to look probably very useful or very good. For simplicity's sake, let's do something really high up high. We'll do something really low, down low. And we'll do some medium stuff. Oop, I didn't give it a location. That's weird. I'll do one more over here. I think I've collected like maybe 5 points. Let's do one there. Okay. So this is like as small of a data set as it's not even reasonable to imagine this scenario, but I don't know what's going to happen. So it's kind of exciting. So we'll launch that data set. It's going to compile all those data points. And just to make sure that I did this right, I'll go ahead and I'll point out you can size, actually. You can size data points by a value. So we'll do weight and we'll do, like a really small dot up to a big dot. So you can see I've got, a high value up here, low values down here, medium values in the middle. Great. Let's try to interpolate that. So I'll launch my plugin. This could be really funny. This could be really embarrassing. I'm not going to lie. Okay, there's our pruning weight. Interpolate by weight. I should point out in the advanced settings, there's a neighborhood function too. So you can increase the neighborhood. That might have made this work better. I'm going to start sweating here in a minute because it's not looking good because this should not take very long to run this process. So something's wrong. So yeah, well, that's what I get for trying to show off. Let's do this. Pruning weight. let's see, neighborhood based on number of nearest neighbors. So that should be, there aren't 20 neighbors because there aren't even 20 points. So that could answer your, maybe it's 20 is the minimum at the point. Let's go like this. Let's do, it is 16. Well, it appears there is indeed a minimum amount of interpolatable data. Obviously, if those 5 points were like in the same little area, this would work, but
Maybe something more realistic, take your NDVI data set and your pruning weights and try to do a translation.
okay.
One question while you're.
Yep.
Well, because we were talking about cell phones and location and whatnot. If you're in an area with low cell reception, can you do this offline?
Not yet. I'm hopeful that the tracker app that we were talking about at lunch. So we are working on a mobile app that's an actual native mobile app. You download it from the App Store. I think that's going to open up the door for offline mapping. But yeah, if you have a vineyard on an island in New Zealand, you know, with no cell reception, you're probably not going to be able to do it. So Terry was saying the example is, well, first of all, any other questions? Let's do some more questions. So these are good. What time is the break, by the way? At 3. Okay, good. Let me just talk a little bit more about the collectors. So each of these points, if I collect it or if I launch the point, you're going to see here's that revisions drawer. So you can see how that point has changed over time. You can download that points data. But you can see all the information in here. So if I edit this data point, I can go in there and I can change it. This revision message is to say, hey, how have I changed it? You know, I could put in here 2024 and then next year come back and change the value and say 2025 and the revisions would take. One of the things we've done, so I did this on my property actually, is I had a whole bunch of sort of to-do things across the property. So I created a to-do collector. And whenever I noticed a brush pile that needed to be, you know, taken care of and burnt or like whatever, some barbed wire here, whatever it was, I had a generic to-do collector and I would have like a notes field, a status field. So it was like to do, in progress, done. And then I was able to visualize the map and give all the to-dos a red dot, all the in progress, a yellow dot, and all the green, all the done stuff, a green dot. So stuff like that is possible. If we're looking at the interpolated railroad block, NDVI, and now, as Terry mentioned, we want to translate that into viticulture information. What are we going to translate it into?
Let's do pruning weight, but go to I would do the grid generator and not with the ones you already did.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Okay, cool. So we have this file here. Let's say we want to turn it into pruning weight. What we need to do is basically come up with a handful of data points that we're going to actually walk out to in the field, take those pruning weights, and we want a good representative sample. So what would be like, how many points per zone would you want? 3? Okay, so we're going to do 3 points per zone. And we want those points to actually even represent inside of the zone, right? So there's different ways to think about this. You could say, just give me 3 points in each zone, and it will just randomly grab you 3 random points per zone. That can work great. You might end up with only points that are around edges, and that might not be a great idea. So we have an option in here, and I'll show you, where you can actually tell it spread the sample points within each zone evenly. So it'll give you like an evenly distributed low, medium, and high within the red zone, a low, medium, and high point within the yellow. And we also have a manual option. So you could just click and just say, I want this point, this point, this point. They're all in red. I want this point, this point, this point in yellow, and I want this point, this point, this point in green. So let's show how to do that. In our plugins, the grid generator is what we use for this. Grids require a block. So I'm going to select the railroad block, and we're going to use the interpolated railroad block NDVI. And we're going to use NDVI. It's pulling this header setting right out of the data set. It's showing you what you're currently seeing. The stratification is basically saying, do you want, I'm going to ask for 9 points. Do you want them just absolutely random? Right now it's set up non-stratified random, which means it's just going to grab 9 random points in this field. And I can show you. If I generate, I have to tell it 9. It's just going to give me 9 random points. Can you see those? If I keep clicking it, it's just going to randomly generate 9 points. But we want to stratify this. I'm going to refresh this. Sorry, go ahead, Terry.
You wouldn't want to do random, because what you're trying to do is use the spatial data you have to direct your samples. Don't, if you just want to do random, don't use the spatial data.
Yeah, there's few contexts like this that you would want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a data set again, interpolated railroad block and DVI. We're going to stratify this. Now, I'm not going to show you right now, but you could just click on this manual here. And that is handy. You can push manual and then you literally just click the 9 points that you want. But I'm going to do this stratified.
I personally like the manual, because if I know the field and I know, okay, that's a low region, but it's really bad right there. Sometimes I'll go right there to bookend my data collection. Like I know where it's really, really high and where it's really, really low. So I'm going to at least have those to get the nice spread in the data. Not very scientific.
But the code that I wrote, Terry, use my code. No, I agree. It's a little bit easier to just click, click, click. But for the sake of example, we'll do random points within each of these zones. So it is stratified by zone. We're going to get, now this is asking for points per zone. We'll do 3 points per zone randomly. I do have an option to avoid edges. What that does is it does its best to avoid edges. Barriers between zones, the edge of the block itself. So it tries its best to do that. So if I push generate grid, it's going to try to do that as best it can. And I can keep pushing this because it is random to keep getting different options. Does that make sense? If I were doing it, I probably would first try the even point distribution. And I would try to avoid edges, because this is going to it's going to do its best to avoid edges and give you a representative sample within each zone. So I push that. This is like the statistical running the code, trying to get the best grid for you. But regardless of how you do it, I've got 3 points per zone, 9 points total. And then I'm going to create this grid as a new data set. So we'll call this pruning weight. Sample grid. And I'm going to just put that right there in the home folder as well. We will add that to MyEV. And then I can close the plugin. Back to my data sets. And okay, so we have this data set here. If I launch it, it's just points. Now, the use case we're doing right now is saying, okay, I'm going to go out in the field and I'm going to collect data at each one of those points. So wouldn't it be great if this was a dynamic data set? If it created me a collector and I could go out, navigate to the point in the field tap on the point with my thumb and add and enter in some data to it to take some measurements. So we can do that. There's this little satellite button here for small data sets only. I think we have it up to like 500 data points. You can convert it to a dynamic data set. So when I push this button, it's going to give me a little warning. That's okay. It's going to create me a collector, and it's going to create me a dynamic data set. Now the collector was created, and it actually added a field for me based on the header that was in the NDVI file. So we'll go ahead and save that. Actually, so what we need is a field for pruning weight. Thank you, Jerry. And that is, again, a number.
And that's the file you give to your intern and they walk out in the field with their phone and they collect pruning weight.
Exactly. Was there a question? Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm assuming I should have gone a little bit slower. I always like to make these data sets thumbable. So if I launch this, these data points are really tiny by default. And if you're out in the field and you want to launch one, it's going to be too small for you to tap on the screen. So I always come down to the point size and just crank that up a little bit so that it's easier to click on.
You're gonna come back to these same points year after year. Just add a field 2023. Anyway.
You could do it that way. Or you could use the revisions. You could just literally just go in and change the value from last year. But I have a grower in California that's doing that, where they're adding new fields. And one of the features on the roadmap is the ability to hide fields. So that data is still there under the hood, but you can hide it. So when your workers are out there collecting the data, they're not seeing last year's field. You know, you could hide it and just see like 2024 pruning weight. You could also set this up right now to color it by pruning weight. And since we don't have values, they're all going to be just 0. But as you're collecting, it's going to show you which ones you collected. So that kind of can be handy just to make sure that you know what you've collected and what you haven't collected yet. So you don't revisit the same point multiple times. Does that make sense? Any questions? I don't expect you to be actually following along. I am kind of blasting through this. Yep.
So if I'm sending out like an intern to collect that data point, he can pull it up on his phone and it'll like direct him to where to go and then record that, or he gets a rough idea of where it is in the vineyard and just goes there, or how does that work?
At the moment, it's a rough idea. So, but you can see your little blue dot when you're on your phone. You geolocate to you, and you can watch yourself moving, and you can launch the data set, and you can get your blue dot as close to the yellow dot as you can. Someone had recommended like a turn-by-turn navigation, but it's like, it's not going to work in, you know, rows of grapes, but at least not yet. Maybe we could, maybe nothing's impossible.
When I've gone out to do it, it's, you know, like Nick said, that the grid is basically a 9x9 grid, right? So when I go out there and the dot is over this fine, then all of a sudden I'm looking at, you know, especially if your GPS is a little off or it wavers a bit, you know, also it'll drift into the next row, or it'll drift back, or your location will, or something like that. And so you can, like when I've done it before, I realized later on when I can zoom in really close, I took it from it was pointing at this panel. I took it from the panel across, but I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, it's close enough. So yeah, unless you were really trying to get an extreme, this tiny runty vine over here and you pick the other one or whatever. But yeah, you get within one row or one or two vines. So it's close enough.
And like we were mentioning in your session, it was brought up that the spatial patterns tend to be pretty gradual and wide. So if you measure this vine this year and that vine next year, it should fall in that zone. It's about 3 o'clock. The next step in this is really kind of fun, but it might be a little bit. What do you think, Terry?
We have one question.
Oh yeah, yes. Let's do a question.
It's a really great practical question because we run into this all the time. If now I give this data set to my intern or the points to my intern, say, go collect some pruning weight in the field. How do they know it's done? So you can either have a field that says done and then color the dots by whether it's done or not, or label the point with the value so that like once I enter a pruning weight, then that pruning weight pops up next to the dot and you know which ones are done.
Yeah, all of the above are workable. What I did here was under the color by header, I just colored it by pruning weight. So as soon as we add values to these points, they're going to get a color. And that would be a good indication. What you could also do is label by. If I scroll down here, point label setting, I could label by pruning weight. And that would also accomplish the same thing. This is going to actually put the numbers, print them on top of the points. So there's a bunch of ways that you could handle, making sure you're not revisiting the same point twice. So like I said, it's 3 o'clock. We're supposed to have a break. The next step in this is we'll pretend we're going out into the field. We'll collect some data. I'll try my best here to correlate the values we enter to these 9 points with the actual NDVI, the original NDVI file. And then we should get a nice relationship, which will allow us to then translate the NDVI into a field-wide, a block-wide pruning weight estimation. Does that sound good? Yes, question. I could turn that on like now. I actually turned it off because the user experience. So as a UI UX developer, you have to balance user experience with functionality. And I could give you all the features on mobile, but it's not going to provide a very good experience. So I'm and again, I'm open-minded to any suggestions and changes. If everyone's like comes at me with pitchforks, like we want our plugins, like I'm going to give that to you. But I'm trying to sort of train the user. Like there's certain things you want to sit down in the office, you want to do it on the iPad, you want to do it on your desktop, to prepare the day. And then there's certain tasks that make sense to do in the field on a phone. But yeah, as we move forward, I think there's elegant ways of putting more and more functionality onto that little screen. Thank you. All right. So this was great to get some feedback from the room. And one thing that's been brought up is kind of like, let's pump the brakes and go back to let's map out the blocks on our farm and let's attach some data to those blocks. And let's just make a map that just shows me some information about blocks on my farm. And I think that's a great idea because if we keep going down this path, which we will in a minute, but if we keep going down this path, it does get a little bit more complicated. So we'll go back to basics. I did want to point out one very important thing. On efficientvineyard.com, we have 2 links that I want to point out. The first is the Vit blog. We post on this blog whenever we put a new feature up. Terry is constantly putting together a tutorial video, posting it up here. And what you'll notice if you watch a few of these videos is you'll start to notice a pattern in the process of dealing with your data. There are similar steps for collecting data processing it, you know, interpolating it, whatever. And it doesn't matter what the use case is, the steps tend to be the same. So if you watch a few of these tutorials, you'll start to really get a sense of the flow. There's like a data cycle that the data comes in, it gets processed. These are the steps that happen, then it comes out, and then we can use it in this way. Does that sound good?
And there's your farm, your block level data, then there's the spatial data drawer where you have, you know, if you're pulling it in, it may seem like a lot complicated, but it's a lot of redundancy. So the stuff you can do with your farm, like I have blocks, I put information in those blocks, I save those blocks, I can download that data. Same thing with the spatial data files, right? I can edit that data, import it, export it, and like a lot of this stuff is redundant. It's just, are you doing it at a farm level or are you doing it at an individual block level of spatial data?
And we'll show a little bit of that right now. And you'll notice immediately that the block level data, it looks just like a data collector. Well, it's built on the same system. It's essentially a data collector, but instead of collecting data points, you're putting data on your blocks. And that's the only difference. So the other link I wanted to show you here on efficientvineyard.com is this MyEV documentation. This will shoot you over to our docs page, and I am doing my very best to keep this up to date. Sometimes it's not up to the very latest version of the software, but I'm trying to document like everything on here. Every little thing you can do is on the docs page here. So after this, I would recommend coming over here. And if I find a good one, there was one Terry just did right here, this getting started with MyEV. This is going to distill what we're doing right now in like, what is this, like a 45-minute video? It's less than that. I don't remember. Maybe it's 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Let me see. It's 30 minutes. Yeah. So cool. There's a, you can sign up on there. Actually, if you have, I should tell you, by signing up for MyEV, you are also signed up for our newsletter. So when on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, we'll send out the latest posts. So you should start getting, just from being at this session and setting up a MyEV account, you should get those newsletters delivered to your email. So everybody good? Any questions before we get going? Oh, the bullhorn. Yeah, that's a good one right here. You see this thing? This feedback button? This is a direct line to me. You can type in whatever you want. Say, I really dislike this thing. I really love that thing. I wish it did that. And this is going to tell me a little bit of information about what farm you're on and what data set you have open if you're trying to open a data set, which is nice. So I recommend using this to get a hold of me. And then I try my best to respond to bug requests within, you'll hear back from me within a couple of days. I might not be able to fix your problem for a week, depending on how busy we are. Please, yeah, push that button. For anyone on Zoom, Terry just said that he yells at me through this button often. So I'm going to refresh the farm. And we're going to just draw a few more blocks to start. So you feel free, you can make up some blocks. What I'm going to do is we have a block called barn block. It's right here next to the barn. And then what's this one called? Is this the Niagara? What's this, Terry? What's this block here?
Yeah. Lower block is Niagara.
This one?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, whatever. We'll just call it Niagara. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Again, I'm just going to create blocks. We'll call it barn block. Grab the square. Click. You can get really detailed with these. There is a tutorial on the blog showing you how you can actually use a collector to go out and walk the boundary of your block and collect these points, download that file, and then re-upload it right here. So this will recognize that kind of thing. Okay, too much information. I'm not going to walk through it. I just want you to know that it exists. So it is possible. Okay, there's barn block.
So you want to go to your farm and then give it attributes.
Right. I'm going to get just three. I'm going to put three different blocks just to get started. So we'll create one more block. I'll just call this east. And we'll just draw a block in the east. Okay, again, these blocks, all they have right now is a title. That's it, just the name of the block. But let's say we have some varieties. So I have, Niagaras, Concords, and whatever, some other variety, Riesling. So I will come into my farm and click on my farm settings, this little cog right here. This is where we set up block data headers. These are the same thing as fields in collectors, soon to be called headers. So we're going to call everything's going to be called headers soon, as soon as I get to that. Yep. This is the same. You'll notice if I say add a block header, it's going to look, it's the same thing. We're setting up these fields. So we'll call this variety. Now, a cool thing is I could just leave it text like that, and I could just type in the variety. But what I'm going to do is use the select option. And this is going to let me actually create options. So we'll call one Riesling. I before E, except after C. Thought it was a German word, So we'll click that. So the way you do this again is you just put your cursor in this field. I'll type in Concord, and then you just click on it to add it. And I'll do one more Niagara. So now I have these three options. So this makes it easier if you're adding data across a lot of blocks. Make sure you don't type it wrong, because it's got to be spelled exactly the same. And if we're gonna color this map by variety, for instance, I'm not going to require it though. So that looks good. Want to do yield too? Okay. Do you want to do this year's yield? We'll do 2023 yield. I before E, and we'll make it a number. Again, just like before. This time I'm not going to put minimum and maximum. I'm just going to leave these blank. We'll still do the suffix. This is in pounds, right? Or tons. Tons. T-O-N-S, not T-O-N-N-E-S, right? Okay. Per acre. Okay. So then actually we could do a min and max, but we'll just leave it this way. I thought this was going to be a total. Okay. We will not require that one either. So I'll add that. So now you can see here, this is my farm. I've got variety and yield. You have to make sure you save. Very important, or else it won't work. Okay, so we'll come into railroad block. And now I'm going to just click on the block settings. And now you'll notice I have a variety that I can choose. This is Concord, right? And the 2023 yield, what would be a great yield? Per 8 tons per acre. We'll save that. Now I've just added that data to that block. We don't have version control hooked up yet, but it's on the roadmap. So we will have version control for blocks. Yeah, so it'll keep track, or if you're delegating access to other users and they're making changes, if somebody screws up, you can see who did what on each thing. I'm actually, let me just check. Okay, yeah, there will be a revisions button there. So we'll go to this east block. Is this Riesling? Sure. Whatever. I'll put a 4, you said? Yeah. Okay. And one more. Barn block. Niagara. And what do you think? 6. Yeah, all right. Now, when we look at our farms visualization drawer here, we can change some settings here. We can turn up and down the opacity. We can, and we put this in because some growers like to be able to see the direction the rows are going underneath. You can color the block by a value now. So if I click on value and we go yield, it's going to give us this nice range between 0 and 8, like so. Let's do variety. Here we go. So we've got Riesling, Concord, and Niagara. So you can color your blocks however you like by any data that you're collecting in there. We can label them too. So I can label these blocks by by just their names. So here we can see railroad block, east, and barn block, or a header. And actually, we give you the option to have 2 headers. So I could say, I want to see the variety, and I want to see the yield. So there. Any questions on basic farm level block creation, block data logging? Yep.
Maybe more specific, so I'm a GIS user, but so if I've already got a polygon layer of blocks and I import it, I see that you've got the option, it looks like, to import the footprint, or at least that's what it says on there. Will that import any of the columns in the DBF as well? Or, okay, so if I've already got variety, row spacing, that'll all come in.
Yes.
Excellent.
I wish I had that data set because it would be fun to show. It gives you the option. So the question, yeah, basically is he's got a ton of data already in a GIS file. Each polygon in that file will create its own new block. You can tell it which field you want to automatically create the title of the block, or it'll just auto-generate a title, and then it'll pull in those fields as well. We have the ability to, so I should say right here, there's this downloads in the, okay, cool. So again, I'm in the farm level. If I click on downloads, I can pull down a GIS file of my blocks. I can pull down a CSV of all my blocks, and I can actually print this page. So a lot of growers have requested just push that, and it reshapes the page and makes it printer friendly. Now, there's this import button. This might be a little bit more than you're thinking at the moment, but if you've got 100 blocks with a whole bunch of data and you want to change it all in bulk, you can download this CSV file, change the data in the CSV, and then import it right here. And it will sync that data with your blocks. Do it. I don't know what kind of spreadsheet program this computer has. What do you think I am? No, it looks like Excel. That would make sense. Windows.
Download it as a CSV, which is just a tab delineated.
It's just a spreadsheet. Yep. Downloaded the spreadsheet. Now, there's this one column here called block ID. Do not touch the block ID. That is
Don't
how,
touch the block ID column.
that's worth repeating. It will break the whole thing. So you can.
It's the unique ID that the program looks at to attach all that data to it.
Every entity in the platform has a unique ID that's generated. So when you create a block, it gets one of these crazy long strings of characters. So yeah, this is how it's going to know what data goes to what. So, and then obviously the headers here need to stay the same as well.
So add another header, add information to it and upload it.
Okay. So thank you, Terry. So what else do we want to think about for our blocks? What's that? Crop load. Okay. So we'll call it crop load. And let's see. So we've got barn block. What do we think?
Barn block was overcropped at 60.
Okay.
I don't know.
East.
Like, this is the bad example. Put like the processor.
Okay. Process. That's an easier one. Yeah.
National, right.
Is it processor? Yeah. OR. That's, yeah. The pressure is too much. Okay. So we have, who'd you say?
Yeah.
Wagner? And you said Welch's, oh, national. Okay.
You do now.
Okay. So we have a new header. And I am going to hope that I can just very simply save this and it saves it in the same file format. I'm assuming this is still a, okay.
That's important. You need to save it as a CSV file, not an Excel file. But
Yep.
Excel might automatically try to make it an Excel file, but you just need to, you save it as a CSV.
CSV. So I'm going to go ahead and import this data. Here we are, comma separated values. Okay.
So
we should-
stop right there.
Yep.
Sometimes when you go to open it, you won't see the file because this little thing right here says Excel file and it's looking for an Excel file and it doesn't see it. So if you hit this little pull down that says CSV or all files, then you should be able to see it. That's just, I run into that all the time. Like, where did the file go? I just had it.
Now we are getting into, I'm just going to warn you, we're getting into high likelihood of failure from a bug perspective, because I know how this goes. It's the universe. It's like I'm giving a live demo, doing a pretty advanced
This
thing.
one should work because
I
do it all the
hope
time.
so. I blame you, Terry, if it doesn't. So I'm going to open that, and what it's going to do is it's going to say which headers are going to be synced, and so there they all are. And now we have some new things. Processor, yes. And it's actually doing it. It's recognized processor. There's text in there. Now it's adding acres and hectares, I think, because those aren't actually headers. Those were auto-generated by the system, so now it's going to load those in as headers. So that might be a bug. I warned you. We'll import that. It's going to yell at you. Make sure you're okay with that. And I'm going to just cross my fingers. Okay, we'll go to the visualization and we'll just label it by processor. National, Wagner, Gallo. What else in this simple stuff, Terry?
If it's your own individual farm, it might be just as easy to click on each block and enter the data. But if you're like dealing with multiple growers and lots of blocks, download the CSV, enter all the data, re-upload it and visualize it.
We have a list view here for blocks on the farm. So you can click that list view if you're looking for, if you've got 100 blocks, you can search for that. So I could just start typing Wagner. Oop. I think it's searching by the name of the block. So I could type in East and it filters down the list and I can launch that block. There you go. There was a question?
Yeah. Are we able to link blocks together, like for crop insurance units and things? Like if we had 4 Riesling blocks that were in one crop insurance unit, is there a way to link them so that the data would compile from those 4 to a single crop insurance unit?
I don't think so. We used to, when you created a block, we used to let you draw multiple block. I think for simplicity's sake, we just created, I think we just made it so every polygon is a block.
Separate.
Yeah, but these are the interesting use cases that I want to hear though. Because if, a couple growers came and were like, everybody wanted that, then we could find a solution. If it's on multiple blocks, it's going to come through as separate blocks. Yeah, each polygon feature is automatic. But again, that's for simplicity's sake. One thing you could do, though, is you could use the export and just bulk say, okay, these 5 blocks are all in this category. You could like give it a category field. Yeah, make a header for that insurance policy, and then you could assign. There's a bunch of ways to, hit the bullhorn, and we'll work on that one. Oh, another question back.
Sure. If we're uploading files from Ellen, all the information she has, will that come with it? Will we have access to all those row spacing, vine information, clones?
Did it work?
Yes. Yes. In ArcGIS is called an attribute file. So it's the same thing as ours, that it's kind of a spreadsheet that has all that data. And when she exports it as a zip shape file, sends it to you, all of that data goes with it. Yep.
I'm so grateful you ran that test right now, because when you asked the question, I forgot the answer, because that's a feature I built maybe 2 years ago. And so sometimes I get hung up on my own software because the specifics sometimes are a little bit nuanced. But yes, it turns out if you upload a bulk file for all your blocks, all of those attributes or headers or fields or whatever you want to call them, they're all going to come with it.
Nick, we have a question from online. What if we have more than one variety in a block? Should we just make those varieties separate blocks then?
That would depend on the use case. If you're looking to process data on that variety, then yes, I would say you'd want to have different blocks. But if it's just a matter of you just want to, if you don't care spatially, like if your inner row, like every other vine is different, or every other row is different or something like that, you could create a field. I believe the select, we never integrated it, but we have a multi-select feature that's coming too. So you could, you could do multiple, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
So where you were selecting the variety for each block, right now you can only select one, but eventually you should be able to.
Let me just check something real quick here. So I think, okay, we didn't. So I have another platform that I manage, and we added multi-select as an option here. So I'm going to make a note right now to make sure that gets added in. So in the next couple weeks, we'll make sure that you can, for instance, if you had a block and you wanted to be able to tag it with Concord and Niagara, there should be a multi-select option here, unless this already does. Let me check something else here real quick. Let's see, block settings. Can I do this? No, I can't. So the multi-select option would let you select multiple of these.
So just like a control click or
You would just like toggle on,
talk to, okay,
yeah,
yeah.
and check the ones, or maybe there'll be check boxes or something.
Got it.
Like I said, we already developed this in another GIS platform, but I'm going to make a note to get that integrated here.
There you go, Paul.
Thank you for the feedback. Multi-select, okay. Any other questions? Yep.
Sorry, this is really Ellen's question, but she doesn't want to ask, I don't think. If we add data now based on files from Ellen's program, and we go back and working with her next year, updating maps, whether we're adding blocks or changing root stock information, whatever attributes we're altering, if we then go in and add those files to this system, will we lose all the data that's been collected, like broken post locations or replants needed? I guess I'm asking, how would we manage that?
Okay, so I'll ask questions back. So you want to take your farm blocks, you got to add data to your farm blocks. Then you want to hand it back to her to do some more editing. And do you want to do it in MyEV or you want to do it in ArcGIS? There's no wrong answer. Okay. So I think the best way to handle that is you would send her the GeoJSON file is probably the best.
Or the shape, yeah.
Or the shape file. You send yours edited back to her. She edits it, sends it back to you. So you're not like working on two different copies. The other question about like data points where you're field collecting. So those are all going to be under the spatial data drawer, not the farm drawer. So you won't lose those. Those will all stay. Yep. Right.
What's really important is just to establish your source of truth. So it doesn't matter where your source of truth is, you just need to establish it. So you don't want both of you making changes. Like if one person's making changes in MyEV and then others making them in QGIS, that's going to be a rat's nest to, get them in sync. But if you establish MyEV is the source of truth, I can still send you a copy of that source of truth so you can use our QGIS. Great. Or, hey, don't change anything though in MyEV because QGIS is still our source of truth. We've been using it for years. We like using that as our source of truth. But then once a year, I'll send you the latest, or whenever I make changes, I'll send you the latest stuff and we can just delete all those old blocks and upload new ones, kind of a thing.
You could make her an administrator on your MyEV farm. So she can actually look at your farm, download what she needs to download, change it and re-upload it before you even know it's gone.
That's found right here in the farm drawer. There's collaborators. Under collaborators, you can just type in now. If you want to add somebody as a collaborator, they have to be on MyEV already. They have to have an account. They don't have to have a farm or anything. They need to go through the login process. You put that email address right there. So if I put in one of my other, I'll just put in one of my other accounts. Now, ngunner@orbitus.com, that's my personal business email. So it's just added me as a read-only user on this farm. So that means I can come in here and I can view everything in this farm from that account, but I can't do anything. I can't add new data sets. I can't change the way things are visualized, but I can just read only. But in here, I can change this permission to be an editor, which means I can change stuff. but I can't delete things. I can't add new collaborators, all that. And then an administrator means I can just do everything that I want to this farm. You said an intern looking for broken posts? That's a great, are you talking about for permissions? Yeah, so that's a great use case. So I would assign that intern to be read only. And then what you can do is you go to your data set. So let's go into my data sets here. I've got that dynamic data set for pruning weights. Oops, sorry, let me launch the data set. There's a little button here for data set editors. If I click that, I can now assign that intern as an editor on that one. Just that data set. So so now they're read only there. And there's an option in the collectors too. I just want to make sure that it worked the way I expect. So that was pruning weight. If I go in and edit pruning weight, yeah, so I can give collector permission to that intern too. So now that intern can change the visualizations on the data set, can edit data on that data set, and they can use that collector. Yes, so if I go in to that pruning weight data set, first of all, if I just launch the data point, it should show me, under revisions, it should show me, maybe that's a feature. What's that? Under the hood, yes, it's logging who's done what, and I should be displaying that. I'll make a note to make sure. I'll check on that.
Hey, Nick,
Yes.
question I have is blocks with multiple clones or multiple root stocks. So within one block, there's, several different clones, and I'd like to just have a way to track that differently, row by row, or different root stocks on them. How do I go about that?
So you're getting into a sub block.
Exactly, sub blocks. Yeah.
Currently, I think the best answer is creating many blocks. You'd be creating a block per row, I guess, or per variety or per clone, and then you'd be naming it. You'd have like a naming convention. So it'd be like Niagara block, row A, row 1, Niagara block, row 2.
The only reason that's like applicable for me at this point was for missing vines, because I was trying to trim it and then export it based on row so that I could track like how many of this replant I need, how many of that replant I need. I know that's probably, a little bit advanced maybe for this type of scenario where we're not really at that point, but if we got to that, it would be just great.
We built in sub block stuff and it was such a mess that we got rid of it.
Well, and I like hearing these use cases though, because there might be a very simple, elegant way to accomplish that without making the platform too complicated. So,
I think one of the things to remember about this is you can use MyEV to whatever level of detail you feel like you need to. So I mean, when you're looking at when you're making the interpolated maps, you decide how many zones do I want. You can have 10 zones on that. Makes a pretty map. Are you going to do anything different in 10 different zones? Probably not. Are you going to do 5? Maybe 3, more likely. So it's just, and so, Mike, your question about, can I do it this way? Yeah, technically you can probably figure out how to outline a row or 2 rows. If you want to manage, or you need that information down to that level, you can do that. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I would say in the data collector, I would have fields or headers of missing vine and what it is, like what rootstock or what clone. Just simple toggles so that you could just quickly mark it. And then that way you can tally it all up when you're done.
I was maybe going to pull it up, but I don't think it's necessary. Your use case there, we have a grower in California that is flagging dead vines and things like, and it's like extremely comprehensive. I mean, it's a lot of blocks. It's thousands of data points. So yeah, you can get pretty detailed with the collectors. Do we have any other questions on this basic setup farm, map? Yeah. Okay.
If you did like broken posts, we keep talking about that. What do you do when they're all fixed? Can you go in and just clear that data set so it's not a layer in there anymore?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things you could do. So you could use a filter to filter data points that
Everything
are
is
marked
deletable.
as done or fixed. So your map only shows stuff that needs to be done.
I think he's asking what happens when you're done with that dynamic data set. Can you just delete it?
Yeah, this is a good opportunity to show you. So right here, let's say I'm done. I want to delete. We have a trash in Efficient Vineyard. If you scroll to the bottom of your data sets drawer, there's a trash right there. So if I take any of these data sets, so let's say this pruning weight trash, it's going to warn me. It's going to drop that in the trash and it's going to get rid of that collector. So there, no more collector, and you can restore it. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you show make a folder and drop the data in the folder, an archive folder?
Let's do a raw. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. So we've got a folder for archived. Okay, we're done with this raw NDVI. And just drop it in. Now it's in that folder. And we get a file path, sort of a file system here. Yeah. If I go into the trash, I can restore, and I can also destroy permanently. Should put a little animation.
Yeah.
Broken post data collection.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to show you right now, but I think on the documentation, I have been putting some of those template files. So I think this is one of them, but let's just do that. It's an easy example. So we'll come into the collectors. We'll add a new collector and we'll call it broken posts. We'll add a field, which will soon be called header. And we'll call it how broke. And we'll make it a select. Actually, yeah, let's do a select. And we'll say very, really very. Yeah. And then exceedingly very or whatever, so yeah, just gone. Okay, fine. So we have these. Now remember, when we're doing
by harvester.
What's that?
Bent by harvester.
So just a quick thing to keep in mind. We're doing something categorical here with the select. So you're going to see one color per option. But if you wanted to rate something on a wider scale, with more nuance, you would use like a number instead of a select, but this is fine. So very broken, really broken, gone. We'll require that because we need to know how badly it's broken. And then let's make another field. Let's just do an image field. We'll do an image. We won't require that, but if you want to take a picture of it, so whoever's fixing it can look at it and assess it for themselves. Do an image, maybe notes.
How about a field for fixed?
Oh yeah,
Or
good
or
call, Carrie.
done?
Yeah, so we'll make a status field. And we'll call this, we'll make it a select. This one will be required. And we'll say to fix and fixed. As you can tell, we've kept these data types very simple. If you've done anything with forms in the past, this would be a good example for like a boolean, which would be like an on or off kind of. Those are things we can add, by the way. So like, if you're like, I really wish there was just an on or off switch, like, is it fixed, off, and check it on when so. But this will do the same thing effectively. So, okay, so we have how broke is it? We can upload an image, make some notes, and then the status. Again, we've got our collector permissions. So, okay, I'm going to assign that intern to be able to work on this, and we'll save that. So there, now you got your broken post. So you're driving through the field, doing something else. And just for the example's sake, sorry, the clicker isn't working. Okay. So you're driving through the field and you see a broken post, you push collect broken posts. And this would pick up my location if I was out in the field. I'm going to just pretend that I'm there. Ooh, right there. And it's a very badly broken. I could just leave it at that, honestly. I do need to say to fix and submit. So I'll just add another one. I'm driving along. There's another one. That one's gone. And it needs to be fixed. And just one more over here. It's really very broke. And it needs to be fixed. All right, so then get back to the office. Check out my broken posts. There they are. We can make them bigger. And I can color them based on how broken. So you can see, yeah, there's the key, very broke, gone, really very. Yeah. And then if you go out in the field and you fix one, I can just edit it and say, okay, fixed. And so what we could do.
And then label your dots with it's
Exactly.
fixed or not.
Exactly. Label by status. There you go. I now don't blame me if this could break. I'm going to try something. This should work. And if it doesn't work, I'll make a note and make sure that it will work. But I'm going to add a filter. I'm going to filter by status. No, it's non-numerical. So right now, filters only work with numerical stuff. But it would be really nice, wouldn't it, if you could just filter by status and say, only show me things that need to be fixed. Because then you fix something, it just goes off the map and you don't have to worry about it anymore. The simpler workaround at the moment would just be to say, it's fixed. Let's just delete that point. right? Unless you want to keep it for your records or something.
yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm gonna actually, and I have my own little bullhorn right here. I'll just make a note. I'll make a note of that right now.
So personally, just because just the way I am, I tend to work in numbers. So like if I did a broken post one, I'd rate it 1 to 10. And then I could say filter it and say, I only want the ones that are really bad, like the 8, 9s, and 10s. And then I'd send
Right.
people out to fix those first.
So I'm making a note, allow filter for categories. But yeah, numbers are great. Numbers are awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it would have to be broke and not broke. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I was talking to a grower who was a part of a sustainability program in California, and they have to collect images at fixed locations throughout the vineyards every year, I believe. And he was using collectors to assign those points, and then each year going out and adding a photo. They'd add a new field, like 2024 photo, and it was just his way of managing all these photos that have to be collected each year and submitted to that organization. They were using it for a lot of things like that. They were scouting for pests. They were using it for, creating maps to share with their neighbors, stuff like that. What else? This is great. Yep.
So how would you recommend? This is going to be a very much a West Coast question. How would you recommend to set something like this up if I wanted to send an intern out every other week to collect leaf water potential? I assume you guys don't collect leaf water potential.
So in the roadmap, we have a feature coming down the pipe that is going to let you hide fields. And that's going to be really useful because what you'd be able to do is basically set up your schedule. So you'd create a collector and you'd say, okay, value for this week and then value for that week. And you'd set up all the weeks. And then each week you would just toggle. You could just leave them all there and they could just know what week it is and enter that value. So that's one option. So you'll be able to like show them only this week's field, and then they'll go out and collect that data. The other thing is we are working with dates as data more. And so now the values you're collecting, are they at the same point every time, or are they different locations for scouting?
It would depend on the use case. The growing community would go probably to different points. We go to specific data pods, that sort of thing. So it could be either.
Yeah. So if it was arbitrary points or different points, you could, if we can get those features working, where date is something that can be filtered by or sorted by. I should mention, when you copy a data set, by the way, there's an option in the data set copy for respect the filters, basically. And so that's where you could have your master data set and you could say filter by date between this date range, copy the data set. Now you have that week's data, and then repeat. And I'm gonna keep going. But yeah, so there's a lot of ways we could do that. Yeah. One of the things we
Like your data pod, and then your date, water potential, date, water potential, date, water potential. And then once you have that, that's how you set up your data.
The only danger there is that every time an intern's out doing data, there's the potential of like deleting last week's value on accident or accidentally changing something. So, but like I said, we're going to be able to hide those fields. Yeah, there's a lot of ways we could handle that. So this conversation, though, this is what I love. You have a conversation. It seems like a fringe case, right? And then 2 weeks later, someone has another problem unrelated to that, but it's like, oh, a feature could solve both of those problems. Still a little fringy. Maybe we don't want to clutter up the interface. We're going to wait. And then, but you start to, these things emerge where it's like, oh, that feature would have solved a lot of people's problems. So then, you know, we implement it. What time is it? What time are we supposed to be taking a nap? What's that?
Whenever we're ready.
Did we want to do any more basic farm mapping stuff? Did we want to explore some of the plugins? What do you think, Terry, Hans? Fried, that's fine.
Yeah.
Again,
I think this gives. Yeah, right. You're fried. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I feel like this is a really good start, and there's a lot to do, as has been said many times. Play with it. It's still kind of aggressive beta phase still. So there's probably still some bugs to be found. There's some features to be added and things like that. So you know, if you keep that, I think Nick's point about just keeping copies of the base data that you're using. So if you upload a CSV file into MyEV, you still got that CSV file, even if you do stuff to it in MyEV. If you really kind of, where did it all go? You can upload it and start again. But please try to break it. I mean, really.
please, yeah.
And check out different use cases. You know, does it do what you want it to do, or because it probably does in some way, but if not, bullhorn, I guess. So, yeah. So if there's other features or other things that you'd like to bug Nick about, please do. We're probably going to be doing some more. The grape program is going to definitely be using this platform more. We're very likely going to be doing some more workshops kind of like this, and kind of getting people started with the platform, but then also kind of, okay, we've got several growers now who have a year of NDVI data, for example, and soils data. What can we start doing with some of those kinds of things? What are the viticulture maps we want to create based on those, and kind of that moving into some of these other tools. So be on the watch out for some of those, but I think this made a really good start.
If I could just plug something that we are working on, and anyone in this room who wants to be a part of it, we can get you on the beta list. We are working on a native iOS and Android app. We're calling it the Tracker app. And I have it on here. It's basically Map My Run, but for tractors or for work out in the field. It's a super simple app. And all you do is you open it up. Sorry, were you?
I was just going to add, it got started because
yeah.
Dan Sprague, who works with us at the lab and has his own farm, family farm, he was like, if I'm out spraying and I stop here and I have to go fill up my tank, I want to know where I left off. So we started just doing a data collector, and we said, well, when you stop, just, tag where you stop so you know. And then we started in with the Tracker app. So as he's spraying, he just turns the Tracker app on his phone and it tracks where he goes. The other case use was if you have two chase tractors at harvest, like you're sharing data, one person can see where the other person was.
Yep.
Like
it transmits your location.
Were they traveling east down the row or west down the row? So I know where to enter into the vineyard with the next chase tractor.
Yeah, it's super simple. You just open it up. It's not getting my location in here, but it would show me where I am in the map. I would say I'm collecting data, or I'm harvesting or mowing, and you can add your own activities. So if you have like a certain type of chemical you're spraying, you could put that in and just push start, and then it just tracks where you are. And when you're finished, it drops everything into a hold on a second here. Well, it drops everything into a list. You can view like all of the places you've sprayed in the last 2 months and stuff like that. So it's kind of a cool app, but we're hoping to put all the collectors into that. So we're hoping that if you're out tracking and then you see a broken post, you can just push collect broken posts. And if you're out collecting data using the native app, should be more reliable and it should be a better user experience. So we're definitely looking for folks to help with that. Yep.
And multiple different people can be like included in a group.
As the on the app.
Yeah, on the app.
Yeah. So if somebody's out doing something in the field, if you're on the same farm through MyEV, you can go into the list and you can see an in progress track. And if you click it, you'll see where that person is in real time. So it's kind of like Uber when you're like watching the car come to you. Well, where their phone is anyway. Yeah. We're calling it the Tracker app. It's not on the App Store or anything. You'd have to reach out to us. We could add you to our beta list, and you have to download a special app that'll let you download the test app. So
would this app provide you with a speed in miles per hour or kilometers per hour to say help you calibrate your sprayer for tractors that don't have a speedometer?
we could look into that. I don't see why it couldn't. It's a simple calculation. Yeah, we could look into that. Make sure your intern isn't driving the tractor too fast.
I'll add one word of caution about the data collector, because you brought up reliability.
Yes.
So you have to also, and it's not necessarily a glitch with the program, but your cell phone is more than just your data collector. It's also a phone. So if you're out in the field and you're collecting data and you get a phone call, it may drop your GPS. So when you go to start collecting data again, make sure like it's giving you a geolocation and
refresh the screen. Yeah, just refresh.
The best thing to do is restart the program and just pick up where you left off.
We've done as much as we can to mitigate against these problems to make sure it's trying its best to make sure it's getting a good reading on GPS, and that it's not just collecting all your data in one spot. But as Jen will attest, in the last week, I think we had that problem.
Yeah. Yep. Same thing happened to me. I was collecting data and a grower called me about MyEV, which was funny. And then when I picked up collecting data again, all the rest of my points were in one location. So
yeah.
And all I had to do was hit refresh, and I didn't, because I just ended the phone call and picked up where I was. So just when in doubt, hit the refresh button.
It's part of the motivation for making the mobile app, or putting collectors into the mobile app, is because with a native app, it should be more, those problems shouldn't be as big of a deal. Yeah.
The same thing happens with Spotify. I'm listening to my music and then I'll get a text and then my music stops. And I'm like, what the heck just happened? I have to start playing the music again.
Anybody that's used to working on ArcGIS knows to save often, so that
Right.
it does and it will get tracked.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's worth, like, if you're collecting a lot of data, it's worth launching the data set every once in a while, just to look at it and make sure it makes sense. And if you look at it and the row I just did isn't there, there's a problem. Maybe refresh and redo that row instead of doing a whole half of a block, and then you realize
You're like, where'd my point go?
they're all gone. Yeah.
And when you're in the field and the GPS is tracking you, there's a little blue dot on the screen that's tracking you. So then you know you're.
You add information to that track, like say you're spraying a certain thing and you want to remember right there, there at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So the activity, so when you start a track, you select an activity or 2 or 3, and you can add custom activities. So you could add, a code for a chemical or something. And then the reporting is cool. So it tracks the line through the field, the start point and the end point. But then when you save that track, it also makes a polygon around it. And then you can run reports. So you can say, I want to see all spraying in the last 2 months. Then it'll make you a map of all the blocks or all the polygons that were sprayed. based on that activity. So we'd like to make it so that then that report could just be one button, save to MyEV, and then boop, it pops it in there, and now you have more data. Right. Yep. Well, and so that's another thing. So we're working with Wine and Grape Foundation to digitize or streamline the reporting
Sustainability.
process for sustainability program. So this is exactly where I'm thinking this obviously to me goes that direction. You're making the tools easy to track what you're doing. Well, that data is needed to be a part of this program. So we should make it easy to submit that data in a usable fashion.
I'm calling it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Terry.